Every day, $3 trillion in trade moves through a single body of water. But this isn't just a shipping lane, it's a powder keg beneath your supply chain. How did one stretch of ocean become the most contested space on Earth? The answer doesn't start with warships or artificial islands. It starts where most people never look. This is why the South China Sea matters to the entire world. Every hour, more than 10,000 ships cross the South China Sea, container vessels, oil tankers, and bulk carriers threading a narrow corridor that links Asia to the rest of the world. The numbers are staggering. United Nations data puts the annual value of goods moving through these waters at between 3 and 4 trillion US dollars. That is about 1/3 of all global maritime trade, packed into a sea smaller than Texas. This is not just a busy highway. It is the main artery for the world's supply chains. The primary route starts at the Strait of Malacca, flows past Singapore, and fans out through the South China Sea toward the Pacific. Nearly 70% of all container traffic between China, Europe, and the United States rides this corridor. Automatic identification system heat maps, built from millions of ship transponder signals, light up the region with dense streaks of movement, each line a lifeline for factories, retailers, and consumers across the globe. But the funnel effect is what makes this region so vulnerable. The Strait of Malacca, just 2.5 nautical miles wide at its narrowest, acts as the world's busiest maritime choke point. Any disruption, a collision, a blockade, or even a severe storm, can send shockwaves through global trade. When a typhoon hit Singapore's anchorage in January 2025, over 1,000 ships were forced to queue, and container freight rates jumped 15% in 2 days. Insurance premiums for transiting these waters are already among the highest in the world, reflecting the risk that a single incident could snarl supply lines from Shanghai to Rotterdam. The alternatives are not easy. Rerouting through Indonesia's Lombok or Sunda Straits adds up to 3 days and hundreds of dollars per container. The Cape of Good Hope detour, used during major disruptions, stretches the journey by over a week and can triple shipping costs. During the 2024 slowdown, some European refiners shifted oil routes south, but the added distance and limited port capacity quickly drove up prices. A maritime economist summed it up: the South China Sea is the world's most valuable bottleneck. If it closes, the global economy pays the price within days. Behind every smartphone, every car, and every supermarket shelf sits a supply chain that depends on these waters staying open. That dependency is why so many states watch the South China Sea with unease, and why the competition for control is not just about territory, but about who holds the keys to the world's commerce. The real question is, what happens when economic lifelines and national ambitions collide? Beneath the waves of the South China Sea lies a layer of wealth that shapes nearly every political calculation in the region. Energy analysts estimate that the seabed holds around 11 billion barrels of oil and 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. These numbers rival the reserves of entire nations and explain why so many states are willing to risk confrontation for a slice of the basin. The U.S. Geological Survey's separate appraisal lands in the same range, while industry estimates sometimes run even higher. But extracting these resources is anything but straightforward. Most of the oil and gas sits in deep water, in blocks where national boundaries blur and legal claims collide. The technology required is expensive, and every drilling attempt carries geopolitical risk. In 2014, the arrival of China's Haiyang Shiyu 981 oil rig, known as HYSY 981, near the Paracel Islands, triggered a standoff with Vietnam that lasted weeks. The rig's deployment, backed by Chinese Coast Guard escorts, was met by Vietnamese patrol vessels and a swarm of civilian fishing boats. The confrontation did not result in casualties, but it sent a clear message. In these waters, energy exploration is inseparable from sovereignty disputes. As one energy analyst put it, every barrel drilled here is a statement of control, not just a business decision. The stakes extend well beyond oil and gas. The South China Sea is one of the world's most productive fishing grounds, yielding about 12 million tons of catch each year, worth up to $20 billion. These waters supply protein to hundreds of millions of people in China, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and beyond. The Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission warns that overfishing and illegal, unreported, and unregulated fleets, often operating under a thin veil of commercial activity, are pushing key stocks like tuna and sardines toward collapse. For coastal communities, the loss of these fisheries would mean not just economic hardship, but a direct blow to food security and national stability. Every claim, every patrol, every diplomatic protest in the South China Sea is driven by the promise of these resources. The result is a contest where economic ambition, national pride, and basic survival all intersect. But as the world's appetite for energy and seafood grows, so does the potential for conflict. The next question is how international law, including the 2016 tribunal ruling, tries to untangle this web of overlapping claims. China's 9-dash line sweeps around nearly the entire South China Sea, enclosing about 90% of its waters. Yet 6 governments, China, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan, lay claim to the Spratly and Paracel Islands and their surrounding seas. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, grants each coastal state a 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. But China's historic claim extends far beyond these boundaries. In 2002, China and the 10 ASEAN countries signed the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea, calling for restraint and peaceful settlement, though it left the core disputes unresolved. Tensions persisted as new outposts and patrols appeared. In July 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration ruled that China's 9-dash line had no legal basis under UNCLOS, affirming the Philippines' rights within its own exclusive economic zone and declaring features like Mischief Reef and Second Thomas Shoal could not generate territorial seas. China dismissed the ruling. As one maritime law scholar said, the law draws a line, but power decides who stands on which side. In April 1995, the Philippines found a concrete platform on Mischief Reef, deep inside its exclusive economic zone. China called it a shelter for fishermen, but the construction marked a shift, occupation by building rather than by force. Over the next 20 years, this approach continued, but after 2014, the pace changed. Satellite images revealed Fiery Cross, Subi, and Mischief Reefs transforming from coral outcrops into sprawling artificial islands. In just 3 years, more than 50 hectares of new land appeared, soon covered by runways, radar domes, missile sites, and deep-water piers. These outposts altered the region's strategic balance, prompting a response. On October 27, 2015, the USS Lassen, a guided missile destroyer, sailed within 12 nautical miles of Subi Reef, a freedom of navigation operation meant to contest any claim that artificial islands could create new territorial seas. A retired naval officer put it plainly: if man-made land redraws boundaries, the rules at sea collapse. The confrontation set a new, militarized status quo. Patrol boats, Coast Guard cutters, and fishing trawlers now fill the gaps between warships in the South China Sea. These vessels, often unarmed or lightly armed, operate in a zone of constant tension, close enough to provoke, but not enough to trigger open conflict. The 1974 battle for the Paracel Islands set an early precedent, with Chinese and Vietnamese navies clashing over reefs and leaving casualties on both sides. 14 years later, the 1988 Johnson South Reef incident played out in similar fashion. Vietnamese sailors landed to plant a flag. Chinese ships closed in, and within minutes, gunfire erupted. 8 Vietnamese sailors died. The reef changed hands. In 2012, a different script unfolded at Scarborough Shoal. This time, Coast Guard ships from China and the Philippines faced off for weeks, each side sending in fishing boats and maritime militia. No shots were fired, but the standoff ended with Chinese vessels blockading the entrance and asserting control. These confrontations rarely make global headlines, Yet they happen with regularity, sometimes involving hundreds of vessels in a single incident. Illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing adds to the friction, as rival fleets compete for dwindling stocks, backed by state-funded militia disguised as commercial fishermen. Every encounter carries the risk of collision or escalation. The absence of clear rules or communication channels means that a single miscalculation could spiral into a crisis. In this environment, the line between peace and conflict is razor thin, maintained not by treaties but by a daily contest of nerves and presence. Every contested reef and shipping lane here shapes the price of goods, the stability of alliances, and the future of international law. As rival claims intensify, global supply chains remain one escalation away from disruption. The balance struck here today will echo in economies worldwide tomorrow.